Nishri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajra Dara Suma Timu Nishasa Uta Varda Nishri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Dagi Jetsun Lama Tuje Che Nyamda Dala Tuje Sikso So Gebe Shesan Dala Dendo So Uyon Sunge Nawa Tsedo So Tseje Ningne Solwa Debe Tse Dejen Korlo Visu Lekshu Ne Yila Sambe Deden Maluk Gemel Hunge Drubra Jinge Lo Tsoni Sodan Dikdun Shabe Tse Dunge Namke Yin So Lekshu Ne Labchen Tsoni Yon So Zoba Chera Nidun Chamra Jinge Lo Chancho Parginin Tsen Tukun Tu New Peme Siodro Lekshu Chancho Drube Gegen Kunshi Shi Tungen De La Drubra Jinge Lo Dagi Lona Chola Cho Chomi Samjur Ngimba Shiwat Chodan Tumbe Dudun Malupa Beme Lungi Drubra Jinge Lo Dorna Tingne Tseraba Tamche Dan Techi Pardone Kav Tamche Rese Kyamne Lama Kele Me Tukche Chengi Dala Siksuso Gongyab Drewe Nyamda Dachala Jetsun Lame Tuje Rabgong Kodan Sungi Nawa Dralme Tu Nyam Sunyungwe Kesan Tobrashu Kewa Kundu Yanda Lama Drame Cheki Pela Longche Chin Sadan Lamge Yender Dorje Change Kopa Nyur Tobashu Pakyuke Kodan Dagi Alu Pakyuke Sundan Dagi Pakyuke Tugdan Dagi Tenyerme Chiktu Chingi Alu Makyuke Kodan Dagi Lu Makyuke Sundan Dagi Makyuke Tugdan Dagi Tenyerme Chiktu Chingi Om Muni Muni Maha Muni Shakya Muni Svoha Om Muni Mahamuni Shakya Muni Svoha Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Shakya Muni Svoha Sangye Chedan Tsoge Chonam Lai Chanchu Pardo Dani Kyapsu Chi Dagi Jinso Gibe Sonam Ki Drola Pinchira Sangye Drupara Shu Sangye Chedan Tsoge Chonam Lai Chanchu Pardo Dani Kyapsu Chi Dagi Chishe Gibe Sonam Ki Drola Pinchira Sangye Drupara Shu Sangye Chedan Tsoge Chonam Lai Chanchu Pardo Dani Kyapsu Chi Dagi Jinso Gibe Sonam Ki Drola Pinchira Sangye Drupara Shu.
In the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha, I take refuge in enlightenment through the practice of generosity and the other perfections. May I obtain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. Good morning. Once I found myself with one of my masters. It's a bit strong, a bit loud, the volume. I'm going to turn it down a second. And I was in the monastery of Sera in India. Let me just see if I can adjust the volume. Can you hear well? Can everybody hear? Anyway, I was with my master, Geshe Thupten Inchen. He was one of my main masters of philosophy. And it was a particular, quite a particular teaching. It wasn't, how can I say, we received regularly teachings on philosophy. This day, however, the nearest, let's say, disciples to him, that we were looking at a commentary of a practice called the Guru Yoga in 6 sessions and meditation. But normally he taught philosophy, but this time we read the commentary of this practice. There were about 70 of us, these closest disciples to the master, and at a certain point he asked us a question. That was his method of teaching. He often asked us questions. He had a very direct, interactive way of teaching. He would start debates during the teachings. Anyway, he asked us a question which we all found a bit strange. Is any one of you who thinks he's a Buddhist in a Buddhist monastery? We're there for that, we thought. We looked at him. This is not a normal question. This is like a trick question, obviously. So nobody answered. And then he said, I'm not sure that I'm a Buddhist. I myself. And we said, how come? What are you talking about? He who dedicates his whole life, has dedicated his life since he was small to teaching, for learning and practice, learning and teaching 12 hours a day philosophy, gets up very early in the morning to do his practices and meditation, and he's not sure of being a Buddhist. How come? Being Buddhist means following deep in your heart with the intention of developing your own qualities to maximum level. There's a difference. There's a difference between doing it with sincerity, or there's the other part which is a bit ritualistic, following the religion, following philosophy. We get lost in the form and we forget the real meaning. And this reminded me and made me reflect on the fact that there's a difference between religion, the spiritual path, or rather the difference between spiritual path, religion, and the religious institutions. In those years, and a while after, I found myself I entered into a deep crisis in a huge monastery with 4,000 monks, but the whole context, let's say, religious in Indian Buddhism, there was a situation that occurred in which I didn't find myself well at all. there was a bit of conflict, a lot of difficulty. Don't want to get into details because I don't believe it's necessary to bore you with the details, and I don't think it's of any use either. But the fact is that one of the people who helped me to overcome this crisis was the thing that helped me was to make this distinction, and is valid until today. One thing is the spiritual path, and by that I mean the process, the inner process of developing our qualities and overcoming and our habits. Let's say in Buddhism it's called mental defilements, jealousy, hatred, fear, etc. So it's a path of growth, development. This can happen with many methods: Christian, Muslim, Islam, Judaism, atheist. They all have their path for inner growth, which is not something uniquely in one, which applies to one religion. Religion, instead, is the instrument which is used for the spiritual path. It exists. It's an instrument which serves the spiritual path. When religion no longer exists for itself and no longer at service for the spiritual path, well, something's wrong. That's what I believe. And I'm talking about religion from the individual point of view, not the general vision. If I practice Buddhism to be Buddhist, that's no point in doing that. There's no point in doing that at all. If I practice Buddhism to develop and to grow spiritually, it has a great effect. Then there's the third point, which is the religious institution, which is the organization which is created by human beings to try to support the religion, because we need organization in order to transmit knowledge, to meet as we're meeting today. So evermore there's a need to organize, and this is done by human beings. I saw with Lama Michel Rinpoche, he was the most anti-institution person I know, in the sense that he really wanted direct contact with people. He didn't like these huge structures. In the first years in the center here, for example, there was a period in which he said, we need a few more rules because we're growing quickly. So you go and make the rules. I said, okay. So I started making the rules. Every rule that I made, he was the first one to break the rule himself. And he brought me a whole list of exceptions. I said, Rinpoche, this isn't working. The last time I brought Rinpoche the rules, which are more today are the guidelines. I read the rules, and he said, and I asked him if there are any of these rules of behavior, if you believe that any of these there are exceptions to these rules, let me take out that rule. And he said, no, it's okay as it is. Lama Michel Rinpoche was a person. He wasn't a person. He didn't dedicate his life to the institution. He dedicated his life totally for the spiritual path. And at a certain point, he needed to organize himself. Let's say, because otherwise it was just a contact with certain individuals. So the religious institution is not a negative thing in itself, but if the religious institution, is no longer an instrument which is totally self-serving, if it becomes self-serving and not for the spiritual path, the institution. So institutions serve the religion serves the spiritual path. This is not something which I believe, it's not something we see in a macro view and to point to start accusing institutions, says this one is this institution is self-serving, and this one too. That's not what I mean. I'm talking about the importance for ourselves on an individual level, how I see the institutions and my religious part, how I view my spiritual path. This is something personal, because it's very easy to lose oneself in the religion, and at a certain point, and the objective becomes to be Buddhist, not to become a Buddha, as it should be. I don't know if that's clear, the difference. The objective that I have, and which I try to share, is not to be Buddhist. If you're Buddhist or not, I couldn't, if you identify as Buddhist, I couldn't care less. What for me is is very important is that we are made up of, amongst many things. One is as our world vision, our paradigm, the way we perceive reality. We have our way of interacting with body, speech, and mind in our everyday life, and that has an enormous effect not only on society, but also in our daily life and those around us. What I believe is very important is to share what is a vision of a world which for me is consistent, coherent. I received it through the teachings of Buddha. I have a great respect. I try to follow this path as best as I can. And for that, I might call myself Buddhist. But the most important thing is to share with you some of the aspects which make life easier, better, which can help us to be better people. The objective is to live in a Buddhist world, but to live in a world where there's less selfishness, hate, anger, envy, attachment, dissatisfaction, more love, more generosity, more compassion, more stability, more joy, more peace, less conflict, etc. And I don't believe that Buddhism is the only key, but it's a very good contribution towards this. Therefore, I wanted to mainly to share with you some of these aspects, okay? Now where do we begin? There's a saying which, from a verse, Giovanni? There's a saying, a passage in passage. I can't remember the precise word. It's something like, and the second verse I can't remember. But anyway, the meaning is, sickness is to identify, to know. Its causes should be abandoned, and the state of good health is to obtain, and the medicine is to take. So the course to take, the path to take is to follow. So we have four stages. Know the sickness, the causes, to abandon the sicknesses, state of good health to obtain. That's our objective. And the path, and for this path, therapy, healing, is to undertake and to follow. And here, there are these 4 points which are fundamental. The first point is, what do I want to avoid? Because at the end of the day, we in our lives, we put our energy into in that which we want, simply. Because it happened to me. I asked somebody, do you like meditating? The person said, yeah, sure. What do you do? I do Genie from Lama Michel Rinpoche. And how does it make you feel when I do it? I feel great. How lovely. So you do it every day. And he said, well, actually, it's 3 months. The last time I did it. I said, why? There are things that we know from experience that are good for us and that we don't do. Do we know these? Did you know this? I asked myself, well, but why? Why is that? Why does one has a positive experience but does not do it? That applies to me even. I can make you a long list of things that I know that are good for me, but I just don't do them. And the question is, why? The answer is the following that I found. We don't do that which we don't want. The 6th Dalai Lama, the 5th he was the most famous and and very important in the history of Tibet. The 5th Dalai Lama, he was the first one that was really called Dalai Lama. And then they gave the other titles to the retrospectively. He was the 5th. He was the 5th. Was the first. So he was the 5th. The 5th Dalai Lama was the first one to be recognized Dalai Lama, and then they gave the title to his previous 4 incarnations. But we're not going into detail about this. But the fact is that he was a person. He was incredibly important. When he died, he was also the king of Tibet. His incarnation should have been the new. So he should have been the next king of Tibet. And they find this boy. They recognize him. But this boy, me, king, had no chance. Me, religious life, no way. And therefore, one of the masters of Lama Ganchen, in 94, we were in the Potala Palace. We had personal visit to all the rooms into which you normally can't go, thanks to Lama Wanchuk, Geshe Wanchuk. And the most beautiful rooms where the Dalai Lama did his retreats. And yeah, in the other rooms, he presented himself to the public, and it was very ornate with lots of gold. But this room for the retreats was very simple, with low seats. But at some point, we get to the room where the 6th Dalai Lama lived. And Geshe Wanchuk said, you see this window? This is where he escaped. You see down below, the yellow houses you see down below were the houses of his concubines. And so he used to escape from the window, the 6th Dalai Lama, and go off with these women. And after a while, and so then eventually these houses were painted yellow in memory of this. So he escaped totally, and he refused to be king, and then they had to recognize the 7th Dalai Lama while the 6th was already was still alive. The 6th Dalai Lama, he spent his time, amongst other things, writing poetry. He wrote beautiful poetry, very deep poetry, and one of these poems, he wrote a poem praising women. He said towards women generally, and where he said another verse, he said the same thing to a particular woman. If I desired enlightenment as much as I desire you, I would be already enlightened. That's what he wrote to one of these women. And he was right. When we fall in love with something or someone. How often do we think of that thing or that person? I asked this question, to a girl who was totally in love. She answered, I said, I think about him once a day, once that doesn't finish ever. It never finishes. When we really profoundly desire something, when it's a passion, a desire, how much energy do we put in that energy? If I'm not all, I'd say a lot. The point is not the point that we don't have energy. We don't have the energy, but the point is, what do we really want? What do I want? In the study of Buddhist psychology, there's a part which explains joyful effort, putting effort derives from aspiration, or which can also be viewed as faith. Or desire. So if we only put laziness is the union between is knowing that something is very important but not wanting to do it. I want it but I can't be bothered. And the opposite is effort, joyful effort, energy into something derives from to want that thing. And the aspiration, the virtuous desire comes from faith in turn. Faith not as okay, I'm not talking about the mystery of faith. The faith here means believing in the existence and the function and the potential of something. Therefore, I have faith in water. I believe that water exists, that it's possible to obtain it. I believe that it can eliminate my thirst. That I believe that it's clean, transparent, cool. I believe in the existence and the qualities and the potential. In this case of water, to eliminate my thirst. And this is what we mean having faith in water. Because I don't believe in water, I will never desire the water, and I'll never go and look for it, however much thirst I have. Therefore, the lack of joyful effort, to put energy into something, is because in reality we don't desire it, and we don't desire it because we don't believe fully in that thing. Therefore, the first question is the fundamental question, what do I want? And that question has two parts. What I want and what I don't want. What don't I want? Because one helps the other. Therefore, following this analogy with sickness, so sickness is to identify so the first of the things we mentioned, what don't I want? Applying this to the sickness, what do I want to abandon? What don't I want? And here, we need to look at ourselves sincerely. Do we ever suffer? I'd say we do, no? Suffering has described as two. One is physical and one is mental. Physical, pain, hunger, thirst, cold, heat, fatigue, extreme fatigue. And mental suffering is sadness, rancor, anxiety, fear, etc. In our life, what do we have in our lives? What do we have more, physical or mental suffering? Are we sure? Are we sure? The fact we have more mental suffering means means that we're in a very rich material context. A master of Lama Ganchen, who's a very, very blunt person, he had this capacity to be, had a great, for example, when two of his disciples complained about another, the first thing he did, he brought two of them to sort it out in front of him. You said this and you said that. So he confronted the problem in a very direct way. And people were quite fearful of him. Lama Ganchen was his assistant for 2 years. And he said there wasn't one day in which he wasn't berated and shouted at. He had an incredible amount of love, but he was very direct. But from that, Lama Ganchen learnt his healing. He was kind of a magic person. You see this great image to my left of Trichan Rinpoche. And Son Rinpoche is above. Right, that should be Son Rinpoche. He had a long beard. If you can look up on internet later, Song Rinpoche, which is Z-O-N-G, Rinpoche. You can look him up on internet. Anyway, now to my mind, his story came to mind. But at the end of his life, a serious spiritual practitioner should die well. At the end of his life, so he had a he had a tape recorder. So when he used it, he used to, when he did his rituals and the other instruments were needed, he'd activate it with his foot and use his hands for other instruments. He left it when before his death. He left strict instructions. He went to his master and he instructed his closest disciples. And he sat down and he died. He recognized the exact moment of his death, and a year before he sent a lesson to his master saying, "Look, I'm tired. I'm old. I've given so much. It's time for me to go to the next life. I don't have a lot more to give." And at a certain point, Trichan Rinpoche, his master, said, when he received the letter, it wasn't, he didn't write it directly, he was old, his assistant had written it, but between them, Trichan Rinpoche, he didn't sign His Holiness Trichan Rinpoche. He just wrote very simply, Lobsang Yeshin. He was very informal in that respect. When the attendant, there wasn't great. When the attendant delivered the letter and said it wasn't very respectful, let's say, because in Tibet, formality, there's a lot of formality. He said, the attendant said, "Well, who is this one?" And Trichan Rinpoche said, "How dare you die before me? I'm also old, but we've got so much to do. As long as I'm alive, you stay there. Don't you dare leave." And that's what happened. Anyway, beyond this, apart from this, this is just to give you an idea what these people were like. Anyway, at a certain point, when I heard a recording of this, suffering is two people, mental and physical. poor people suffer principally from physical suffering. The rich suffer principally from mental suffering. At the end of the day, both of them suffer to the same degree. If we have more mental suffering, it's a sign that we have an abundance, materially speaking. And we look at our life in the modern life, Western, but not only Western, in many parts of the world, the more we increase our comfort in so many senses, increases proportionally or even to a greater degree psychomedications, psychopharmaceuticals are increasing at even a greater rate. So we can see that material ease doesn't bring happiness, because if we look at our lives, we have, materially speaking, well, we have things quite easy, but it doesn't mean we suffer less. Therefore, we have mental and physical suffering. When we suffer, what do we normally do? Do we try to understand why we suffer? Or do we just suffer, wait for it to go past? Or do we point the finger at something or someone as the cause? Usually we ask why, and then we point the finger at something or someone. If I have a physical pain, I need to know where it's come from, or a mental suffering, or rancor, sadness, anxiety. We try to project it onto something or someone. Usually, I'm generalizing now, but usually, where do we point our finger as the cause of our suffering? Mainly on three things. And here we shouldn't think and I'm not talking at a philosophical level, but I'm talking about experiential, practical level. We usually we project our suffering on three things. The first thing is we believe that we suffer because we can't have that which we want. We believe that we suffer, reality is not as it should be, because people don't behave as I believe they should do, because my husband, my wife doesn't behave as he should do, because the situation, economic, political situation is not right. The first thing, not because things don't work out, but because they're not as we think they should be, because we can't have that which we want. I don't know if you recognize yourselves in this or not. The second reason that we believe we suffer, because things are as we believe they shouldn't be. The first one, things are not as they should be. The second, in the first one, I can't have what I want. Okay, so in the first case, we believe we suffer. In the first reason we believe is that because I can't have an object of desire. And the second reason, and we believe that we suffer, that we have objects of aversion, things we don't want. I don't want to be with that person, but I have to be with that person. And this one says this, and this is not right, and so on. We have our various objects of aversion. There are two forces that propel us, aversion and attraction. These are the two forces that move us. The first one, for which we believe we suffer, because we can't have that which we want. And in this we include the reality that surrounds us, the way people behave, etc. The second case, we believe we suffer because we have to live situations that we don't like. The third reason, third reason, we believe because we have to separate ourselves for things to which we're attached. I'm with somebody I like, I have to sooner or later be separated from that person. I'm in a pleasurable situation, but that situation finishes. Ending up with the person I love, sooner or later I'm separated that person. Either he dies or she dies or I die. Generally speaking, we can sum things up in those three reasons. Do you recognize yourselves in these things? Try to observe your own suffering. You don't have to make a long list. And see if the reason, and just observe if you're suffering, you project it onto one of those three things. Out of the three, which do you think is the most prevalent? The first one. Even in a rich context in which we live, we suffer mainly because we suffer more for how things are more than how things should be. Let's philosophize on this a little bit to analyze. The question: is it possible to have everything I want? What's the nature of desire? Dissatisfaction. The more I have, the more I want. We know this. We've known this since we were little. We don't need a philosopher or a scientist to tell us this. We know this. But it doesn't mean that we follow this. We act accordingly. The world, the idea that the world should be as I want it, that I can obtain everything I want, it doesn't work, because we change our minds. I want this, then I have this, and after a while I want this. We change our minds. I want something else. For example, because if we had a desire, only one desire, and it remained stable, and we obtain it, I would be satisfied and no longer suffer. But we know it's not like this. Is it possible to avoid the things we don't like? No. It's impossible. Is it possible to non-separate ourselves from the things we like? It's not possible to have everything we want. It's not possible to avoid things we don't like, and it's not possible never to be separated from that which we want. In our ignorance, in our spontaneous way of being, we project our suffering on these three things. Do we try to avoid them or not? Do we try to have objects of desire? Do we try to make the world as we believe it should be? But not only do we try, we have the arrogance, we have the presumption to say the world should be like this. But how dare you? What? You shouldn't be like this. What are you thinking? This situation shouldn't be like this. We even make our desires basic needs. We constantly try to avoid objects of aversion. We have this kind of illusion in which we try to obtain the object of desire. In other words, to ensure that the world around us is as we believe it should be. In other words, we have an idealized view of reality, of our reality of people that's a and the problem is our reality, the reality doesn't correspond, our experience don't correspond to our idealized view of how things should be. And the second point is we try to avoid things that we don't like. Oh, that person, I don't want to talk to that person I don't, this person I don't like. Do we try and avoid things and people we don't like? And we try to keep that which we like, we want. And they lived happily ever after. I'll never leave you. If we see this strange attitude that I've seen many times, that when there's something bad, horrible, I hear people say, "Oh, can't spend my whole life like this." They sometimes say, "I can't possibly live like this forever." My answer is, don't worry, like this it's not going to remain. It's either going to get worse or get better. But like this, it's not going to stay. Because things are constantly changing. If they improve, what's the point of getting worked up about it? On the other hand, if there's something nice, we want that situation, want it to last forever. But that's an illusion too. We have this attachment to nice things that we don't want to be separated from absolutely, which is something crazy, because the essence of things, the nature of things is to constantly change. The moment something begins to exist, it begins also to end. If I have to separate myself from you, the moment I meet you, 29 years and 11 months and 29 days, and we go on, and it's like time going backwards. We inevitably arrive at a point when we're separated from each other. But for some strange reason, we dedicate a big part of our energy for these three things. We try to try to have what we want and that the world be as we think it should be. We try to avoid objects of aversion, and we try to hang on to things and situations that we like. Okay? Now, let's have a look at these three. Let's look at these three things from a different perspective. It's not true that we suffer because the world is not as we believe it should be. It's not true that I suffer because I can't have that which I desire. Reality, really, I suffer because I want that which I cannot have, not because I can't have what I want. I suffer because I project an idealized image onto the reality that surrounds me. I hang on to this idealized view instead of adapting to the reality in which I find myself. I don't know if any of you have ever said to somebody, "You shouldn't be like this." Have you ever said that? Has it ever happened to you? I imagine it has. And if it happens to us, somebody asks us, inside the answer is, "I'm sorry, I'm like this. I'm a result of all the causes and conditions that I've lived through I'm a result of an infinite number of causes, genetics, that which I've learned, social, cultural context in which I live. I am what I am. I'm sorry, I'm like this. This is a result. I'm a result of infinite number of causes. I am like this. And the other, if we were to say this, also the other is like this. Therefore, it's not true that we suffer because the world is not as we think it should be. We suffer because we hang on to this idealized image of how the world should be. Is it clear the difference between these two things? I don't suffer because you are like this. I suffer because I grasp onto an idealized view, image of how you should be. Okay? Therefore, I don't suffer because I don't have that which I want, but because I desire that which I cannot have. It's not because somebody's saying, no, you can't have that. It's not like that. I can't have, because the causes and conditions don't permit that. So, because in the complex interdependence of life, there haven't been the conditions for that which I desire to be there. Doesn't mean that tomorrow may be different, but in this precise moment, the causes and conditions have not been such to permit me to have that which I would. It's not true that we suffer because we have to live situations that we don't like, rather that we don't like the situation in which we find ourselves. It's not. In the first case, we are the victim. We suffer because the world isn't as we believe it should be. We don't even say, I believe, or according to me. We simply say, it's not as it should be. But we suffer because the situations are horrible, because we have to separate ourselves from that which we like. The second version. In the first situation, we're the victim. As a victim, I have no power, I can't do anything. But we just wait passively until the world changes. So, in which there are no more ugly situations and I can have what I want. In the second case, we're no longer victims, because I don't suffer because I can't have that which I suffer because I project a reality which is not consistent, which is impossible. It's inconsistent with that which exists. I suffer because I have aversion to situations in which I live, not because the situations in which I live are bad in themselves. The third thing, it's not true that we suffer because we have to separate ourselves from that which we want. We suffer because we grasp onto the notion of something being permanent when it's actually impermanent. Because if I'm drinking water, which I like so much, oh, my water, oh, it's my water, I like it so much. And I think about my water all day. At a certain point, the water finishes. If I have the awareness of impermanence, when the water finishes, I'm happy. Not because the water's finished, because I've received it, because I had it. I accept that the water, because I accept that it finishes because it's natural, automatic. Yeah, the end, in the same way that the day finishes, however nice the day has been, sooner or later the day finishes. What, do we start crying because the day's finished? No, we need to rejoice that we've had such a nice day. Therefore, in the first point, we recognize the sickness, and the second point, the causes of the sickness. Sickness is suffering. We can look at so many levels of suffering. The second are the causes of sickness. According to Buddha, the causes are not the situations in which we find ourselves in, but rather our own defilements, so-called mental defilements, inner attitudes. Therefore, our anger, envy, jealousy, unlimited desire, attachment, selfishness, obsession with self-gratification, ignorance, and then the actions that we take are a consequence of these mental defilements, and they in turn create consequences. And when I first arrived in Albagnano in 1999, I don't know why in that moment, but there was Gabriele and Francesco. They brought me by car. We came along the lake. It was a very rainy night. Anyway, Francesco decided that we take the scenic route, the road along the lake. The first time I went to Albagnano, he said, I'll show you the scenic route. And I said, okay. And then there was a kind of click. In Brazil, we say when the token drops, when the penny drops. In the old telephone, sometimes with the token dropped and the line was connected or not. So in English, it would be the penny dropped. And I didn't understand before. At that moment, I understood. And that moment, I understood something which I hadn't understood previously, and it was fundamental. That was, problems exist and will always exist. The rule is, when one rule finishes, there's another one immediately. And then there's the exception when a problem finishes and there isn't another one, we create it anyway. This is what usually happens. When I had these perceptions, problems exist and they'll always exist, I relaxed. I said, okay, great, hey. Really, honestly. Because if problems exist and rules exist, the solution is not to solve all problems. And here, and I connect to a phrase that Shantideva in his famous text, how can you cover the surface of the whole earth with leather in order to walk comfortably? And some would say, obviously not. There's not enough leather in the world to cover the whole world. All you need to do is to make a pair of shoes which are comfortable. If we look at our feet, if we cover them, we protect our feet, wherever we go, it's as if the terrain is comfortable. Similarly, we can't resolve all the problems, ensure that everything goes well. It's impossible. I know so many people, and from a distance they all look normal, but close up, then certainly not. Nobody is normal. I can assure you that nobody close up is normal. Therefore, we all have our problems, some less, some more. I don't know anybody who didn't have problems. Starting with my own guru, Lama Michel Rinpoche, but who lived continuously in a state of peace and balance. But he had so many problems that we can't even imagine. But he managed to live these problems in a serene way. If I have this, I had that expectation before the penny dropped, that when I resolved this problem or that problem, I would be happy. I had this illusion. And what happens when we solve one problem? There's another one. It's not enough. Therefore, problems exist and they will always be, thank goodness, because that means that my objective of life is not to resolve problems, but is to obtain a balanced state in which I can maintain regardless of where I am or with whom I am or whatever happens to me. I have my inner stability. The objective is not to protect, to cover the whole terrain with leather, but rather wherever I find myself, whatever surface I find myself is, I manage to have my own, I have my shoes, I have my inner stability, and I'm in serenity. Because as long as we believe that, let's call this materialistic utopia, because materialistic utopia means belief that means that we can be happy through a material development. As long as we believe this, our energy will be directed towards this. What we said at the beginning, we put our energy into that to which we desire, that which we believe. When I see that it's an illusion, and what I want is not to live in a perfect world, but rather to live in a perfect way in the world, with perfection in the world I live in. I don't want to cover the whole earth with leather. I want to have a really comfortable pair of shoes in which I can be well in any situation I've felt, any context. Not to control situations and people around me, but to reinforce my own resources, which permit me to live well all the situations I find myself in. And somebody might say, is it difficult? I'd say, yes, certainly, I agree with you, it's difficult. Nobody said it was easy. But you tell me, is it easy? I was thinking, infancy, childhood, is it easy or difficult? For the person who's living it. It's lovely, childhood is lovely. Well, mine was very nice, but it's difficult. I remember when I was little, everybody treated me like an idiot, and I was thinking, why are they treating me like this? I had to do things without understanding why. I had to learn to relate, to understand, and to create my own identity. Not easy. Adolescence? Even worse, or not? Even it's lovely in so many ways. To become an adult, in which one has to try to, what I want to do, what job do I want, shall I marry, not marry? Oh, I don't want to marry that, but I shouldn't marry. Is it easy or difficult? Your experience? It's difficult. It's nice, but it has its difficulties. Okay, once you've gone over this, you manage to get into adult life. You have to maintain your life, look after the family. You realize you can't do, you haven't done that which you want to do. Old age, easy or difficult? Difficult. Die, I can't remember. But what happens is, in itself, it's not easy, in the sense that you have to make an effort, which is normal. There's nothing bad in that, but what I want to say, as we have to make an effort, just may as well make an effort towards things that bring results in the future, good results. Because if I'm in front of the land, I can plant something good and then obtain the fruits of this. Or I can be there and pick up stones and throw them down and do things that have no purpose at all. But something I understood a while back. My mother, I was with my mother in Beijing. I don't know why, I won't tell you the whole story. And she had to have surgery for she needed cancer surgery, and instead of going to Brazil, as she intended to do, she decided to do it in China, and she was there for a month. And when we did the exams, and we had to wait for the results, it was the first time, after a very long time, And I had a week in which I had nothing to do. Lovely house we were in, friends who helped, and I didn't have anything particular that I had to do. And I realized one thing: when we wake up in the morning, there's so many things we need to do. At the end of the day, we're tired. Is that right? But what happens? But what happens if we've got nothing to do the whole day? At the end of the day, are we tired or not? Yes. Therefore, it's not true that I get tired because I've done so much. I get tired simply because I get up, and the moment I wake up, I start consuming my energy. Well, I don't do this, it's too tiring. But even if you don't do it, you're going to be tired. When we say the path is to reinforce our own internal resources, to familiarize with our patience, with stability, with love, with gratitude. Is it difficult? Yes. Look oneself in the eyes and to confront one's own shadows. Is it difficult? Yes. But the thing is, it brings good results in the long term. That it helps us to be well. Because I don't want to meditate because it's tiring, but being tired is part of life. Therefore, I'm tired. It's just an excuse to say I get tired. Therefore, what do I want? I want to cover the whole surface of the earth with leather, or do I want to make myself a nice, comfortable pair of shoes? What the world around us transmits is the world tries in quotation marks to sell us a world around us covered in leather, which is easy to walk on. Our experience, on the other hand, says this is never enough. Therefore, we need to invert this. The third question. The first is the sickness is to recognize. What is it? The second, the causes of what I recognize as the causes of the sicknesses should be avoided. And the third thing, the state of health is to obtain. It's not enough just to recognize the sickness. I have to direct myself towards good health, towards what I want. I don't want to live in a perfect world. I want to have such a degree of inner peace and stability wherever I am, with whom I am, whatever situation I'm in. I will maintain my inner peace, satisfaction, stability, and I will be in harmony with myself and that which surrounds me. Because I realized I cannot control the world around me. I don't know. What about you? Have you ever tried to control a person? To change somebody? With the best intentions in the world. Has anybody succeeded here? I've tried, and I didn't succeed. Therefore, where I can act effectively is to transform myself. And in that way, I automatically have an effect on others and help them to improve and to diminish their suffering as well. What is the state of health that I want to achieve? And there's a very important point where I want to give a bit of emphasis today. Very often, when we talk about this path, there's a lot of emphasis is put on the causes of the sickness. I shouldn't have anxiety, I shouldn't have anger, all the things that we shouldn't do. And sometimes the spiritual path is lived as a kind of a battle. The struggle, I've got to struggle against my anger with dissatisfaction, etc. And in various texts, there is this analogy. The inner battle in the roof Okay, around the temple you see the standard of the liberation, which represent on the roof, sorry, on top of the roof, we have these standards of liberation, which represent the things that we want to attain. There's a phase of before this, we achieve this state. There's a point in which I have to confront my mental defilements and make an effort not to follow them. But it's like climbing up a mountain. I'm going towards the top of the mountain. I go towards the light. I don't try to eliminate the darkness. If I go into a dark place, how can I eliminate the darkness? Finding light. It's not going against darkness. Therefore, the key is not to go against our mental defilements, but rather to cultivate our qualities towards virtue. And what do we mean by virtue? Virtue, that which is virtuous, is that which in its interaction brings the being to a state of happiness and well-being. That which is non-virtuous is that which, when it's developed in the interaction, brings the being into a state of suffering and unease. That's what we mean by virtuous and non-virtuous. This is meant by positive and negative. Positive, that which when it interacts, in reality helps whomever interacts with that to suffer less, to be well. That which is negative, that which, when it's present, diminishes happiness and increases suffering. Is that clear? Therefore, when I see, what do I want? Where do I want to go? And this is a point which is absolutely fundamental, which unfortunately the society in which we live is missing. We're very much directed towards solving problems, but we don't know where we want to go. I remember once I was in Brazil a few years ago, and there was a moment in which, but in that particular moment, there was, not that there isn't today, but there was a social, political crisis that was very strong in Brazil. And there was a level, a very generalized state of dissatisfaction, anger with this social, economic, political situation. And I spoke to many people. As I don't live there, visiting occasionally, sometimes you see things better. I saw so much dissatisfaction. There were so many demonstrations and so on. But there was the lack of one important thing. Everyone spoke of things that weren't going well, but nobody spoke about how the objective they spoke about. This politician's no good, this political social aspect is no good, but nobody said, but what is the Brazil that I desire? And nobody even allowed themselves to dream about what they wanted. And when we think something is not right, it's okay to recognize this in order to stop feeding it. But we need to dream, to go beyond this, to understand. And then at the end, we come back to ourselves. Therefore, one thing is to recognize the sickness. Another thing, which is very important, is to desire the health. One thing is to see war and not to want war, is to desire peace and to go towards peace. There are two different things. One thing in a relationship between two people is not wanting to be into conflict with the other. Another thing is to wanting to live with trust and harmony and love with that person. If I just want to eliminate the conflict, I'm continue to go around the same thing. If I want harmony, peace, union, trust, and love, I direct myself towards that. They are two different things. I don't know if that's clear. Because if two people argue, one can try to avoid the conflict, but the latent conflict is always there because there's lack of something healthy. But if there's a trusting relationship of love with harmony, there's no space for conflict. But peace between two people is not merely the lack of conflict, it's the harmony between two people, the union based on trust, reciprocal love. Not merely the lack of conflict. Therefore, the same thing, to get away from... if we eliminate a sickness, doesn't mean to say I'm in good health. If we look at our days, very often in our lives, we direct ourselves towards health or to eliminate this sickness. Or even worse, to eliminating symptoms. The rest of the family arrived. The two dogs have just arrived and they just barked. Our tendency is we try to eliminate, to go towards health. When we go to the doctor, why do we go to the doctor? Because we want to be in a healthy state, because we want to eliminate the sickness, or because we want to eliminate the symptoms? Usually, let's be honest. Well, come on, let's say it like it is. We want to eliminate the symptoms. And then sometimes we take a step further and say, I don't want the sickness. But this, for example, I've seen people, couples, and at a certain point, there are conflicts. Usually when there's a conflict, where do we put our energy? In resolving the conflict? To understand why there's a conflict and to resolve it? And to construct harmony? Or to just make the conflict go away? Oh, let's go to a nice restaurant. Let's do something nice together. Oh, let's forget the problem. Let's put the energy on something else. The tendency is that, or is not to look oneself in the eyes. Where is the conflict coming from? How come there's this? How can we resolve it? There's not much maturity amongst people. I'm sorry if I'm so blunt. But in our experience, does this work or not? All you have to do, look at ourselves. When we're sad, when we have a mental suffering, do we try to understand why? Or do we try to forget the suffering? I'm sad. I'm going to go to the shopping mall. I'm going to buy myself a pair of shoes. I'm going to eat something that I like. I'm going to look at a film. I'm going to smoke a joint, whatever. I'm sorry I'm so dropped. I mean, these are not the solutions that I look for. My solution, what I usually ask for is a bit of silence, and then the thing goes. But so everybody takes refuge in something, sensual pleasure, silence, smoking a joint. But we try to make this go away, to get past it. But when we do this, seeing as the sickness is still there, the symptoms return. Have we realized this ever? The state of health is to be attained. We need to direct ourselves towards a state of health, and not simply to ever avoid the symptoms. Therefore, in our spiritual path which Buddha transmitted. First are these three things that we mentioned. What do I want to avoid? Why do I suffer? What do I want to attain? But at the end, and the fourth thing is, what do I have to do this? To arrive at this, we must have clarity on what I want and what I don't want. What do I want? I want to be with harmony with myself and with others, independently of where I am, with whom I am, in what situation I find myself. I don't know if you share this desire with me. Once, this process I spoke of faith, desire, aspiration and effort, this is what happens in advertising. Why does a company make advertising on its product? Why? Because they want to spend a lot of money? No. I want to advertise my product because I want people know my product, know about my product, its qualities, so that they desire it, and so that they put effort into it and energy, which means buying it. What would be a Buddhist advertisement? Let's try to imagine. Let's imagine the following. Let's imagine our lives, your life, with all its subtleties, with all its body is what it is, not different. And it's the good bits of your body, bits you don't like, the health that's there, the health that isn't there. The body is what it is. Observe for a minute. Look at your economic situation. It's not changed. The relationships around you with which you live have remained the same. The world in which we live, it's the same world, with its problems, with advantages, disadvantages. Try to imagine your life with a different perspective. Imagine your life that we have today, that you have today, but where you don't project, no longer project onto how things should be. Your life where you manage to be in harmony with everything that happens around you. Your life where there's no more anxiety, fear, rancor, and hate. Your life where instead there's harmony, gratitude, respect, love, where you're in peace with yourselves and with others. A life in which you're no longer grasping at impermanent phenomena as if they were permanent. But we accept in a natural way and spontaneous way the continual transformation of everything, where you manage to see that reality in which we live is subjective, and you don't grasp anymore at an objective reality which is not there. A life in which things are the same, but you're no longer obsessed with your own self-gratification, but you manage to see the happiness and suffering of the others as being just as important as your own, and you find yourself in a state of harmony between internal and with others. Do we want this life or not? I do. This is like a Buddhist advertisement. This is what it would be. But before I put energy into this, I need to put energy into it. And it's a kind of important utopia. And utopia which means dreaming, desiring something that transcends the present moment. In that sense, it's a utopia. If we look at all the Buddhist symbology, for example, if you look around me, there are these kind of 5 windows, let's say.
Sono così non per una ragione simbolica, sono le 5 finestre perché nella costruzione
Not
originalmente c'erano 5.
not only symbolic, but because there were 5 windows and they remained. But we have green, the yellow one, the blue, the red, and the white one with these images in them, and the Buddha and the mothers, 5 mothers, Buddhas in a masculine and feminine form, which means that all of us have the same potential to reach this state of peace that we've been talking about. So therefore we see the male and feminine aspect. Even though when that which continues from one life to the other is neither male or female, doesn't have a sex. We try to see the world, so we see everything through our relative view, subjective view, so that's why we put a masculine and feminine image. Okay, there's been a lot of question about sex, but generally there's males. Until now we've had male, female, and hermaphrodite. So we all have the same potential. The second thing, they're not images of gods where we ask for something, but rather it's a kind of advertising of what we can achieve. The image of Buddha and the 5 mothers, Buddhas who are Buddhas as well, they represent our own potential developed to their maximum potential, as if to say, look what you can achieve. Verde, Amoghasiddhi, Buddha Amoghasiddhi, which means overcoming one's own jealousy, envy, doubt, uncertainty, to attain the state of being able to rejoice, also for the happiness for others, and to obtain courage and certainty, and losing totally fear. Yellow, Ratnasambhava, Buddha Ratnasambhava, and Lokshana, the female, represents overcoming one's own arrogance and avarice, and not comparing oneself with others, in which you don't need to compare yourself with others to see yourself. Generosity, the capacity to share what we have with joy with the others. And also represents the energy of increasing energy. And whereas Amoghasiddhi, the green one, the first one represents the action of opposing that which not. Okay, and then we have Akshobhya, who's blue. And why is the mother white? Because the mothers represent elements as well. The green wind, yellow earth, the blue in the center, at the heart, which represents water. That's why the mother is white rather than blue, because she represents, Mamaki represents water. What is represented here? Love, compassion, stability, inner stability, spontaneous joy, overcoming anger, rancor, sadness, instability. Then we have the red, in which we have okay, we start from the beginning. Amoghasiddhi is the end of the spinal cord, is Amoghasiddhi, the green one, Ratnasambhava at the navel, and Amoghasiddhi and the heart. And then at the throat we have the red, Amitabha, representing our ability to overcome our unlimited desire, dissatisfaction, overcoming distraction, developing concentration and control of one's own mind, and also satisfaction and capacity of communication, the word, verbally, that speech. Therefore, that is at these are the qualities that we will, the Amitabha, the throat represents, and then the white at the crown. Sorry, with Amitabha, we had Brahmavasini fire element, and finally we have the white one, which is Vairochana, and the mother, Akashvajri, who represents space, representing our capacity to overcome ignorance, or rather, to obtaining wisdom, the capacity to relate to reality in a consistent way. I see that which is impermanent as impermanent. I see that which is subjective as subjective. I relate in a very consistent way. I see it as it is, in a coherent way. Therefore, when we see the images, where they don't represent something away from us to which we ask for something, let's say in inverted commas, it's a kind of advertising of what we ourselves can become. And those images that we see, Atisha, the big images, Lama Tsongkhapa, Buddha Shakyamuni, Trishan Rinpoche, these are our, if you like, witnesses. As in advertising, you always have somebody who says, I bought this and I found it to be very useful. So they're kind of our testimonials of the products. You see these, you know those door-to-door salesmen, there's certain products which are only sold door-to-door. Let's say Amway, for example, but that's just something that comes to mind. These are products, they usually say, they knock and they say, I bought this product and it worked. It will for you to, they've put into practice these teachings and have managed to achieve this state of balance and harmony. And this is, they're part of our lineage, so-called lineage, because people in the flesh have shown us that it is possible. And the same that Lama Ganchen and all the other masters, they showed me, as they appeared in the flesh, showed me that it was possible to construct a pair of shoes and walk everywhere. I saw him maintaining his peace and balance and stability in any situation. Where they've been, even when he was accused of terrible things which he hadn't done. In his life, very often was misunderstood. He did things which were criticized, and so things didn't go smoothly for him. But I never saw him lose his stability right to the end of his life, where his body was degenerating, but he was always there, manifesting his inner joy and stability. In hospital, in the last days of his life, whomever entered, he was always sitting down with his legs crossed. He never lay down. Whomever, it was the doctors or nurses came in, he always did the thumbs up sign, oh, everything's okay. He never once complained. He never manifested a state of suffering, either physical or mental, even though physically. He said, once I've got a pain here, oh, okay, in a couple of days I'm going to die. No, I said, no, it's not true. You don't have to say this, that, and the other. But he knew he was going to die. I saw that it was possible. I've seen that it's possible. Therefore, when we talk about these images, they remind us that we too can do it. Because we all start from the same point of departure. Therefore, when we ask ourselves, what do I want? It said, I want to be a Buddha. But what does it mean, being a Buddha? First of all, what is a Buddha? The word Buddha, translated in Buddha, is translated as Sangha. San means to eliminate, which means, and Ye means to develop. A Buddha, she or he, a person, whomever, who managed to eliminate completely all the inner conflicts, etc., and to develop maximum potential qualities such as love and compassion. And that is simply what a Buddha is. Therefore, I want to attain this state. Do I want in life, in this life, wherever I find myself, do I want to be well, in peace with myself and the others, or not? Okay? This is a question where we start from. And here we find ourselves at a fork. We have to choose the way. And you can't go along both roads of the fork. Well, you can look at you take one road and you see what's happening in the other road. But you have to choose one road or the other. And this fork is, what do I want? I want to live in a perfect world, or do I want to live in a world with perfection? I don't know if that's clear. The fork says, the conditions around me be in a certain way so that I am well, or do I want to develop my own inner potential forces so that I can live the world in a peaceful and harmonious way? Whatever. And even if we talk within religions, this is a fork. In other religions, there are these two options. The concept of paradise, which exists in so many religions, and also in Buddhism. But when we think of Buddhism, what do we project on Buddhism? What is paradise for us? Paradise is a reality in which we have everything that we want, and we avoid that which we don't want, and we never get separated from that which we want. Or not? Is that right? In the idea of paradise, do we have to be separated from people we love? No. From that which we want, it's forever. In other things that we don't like? No. The only things we like, that's paradise. But we forget just one thing. If I go to paradise and I bring myself, and I'm dissatisfied, I have inner pain, my own inner conflicts, I will live that reality through these inner conflicts. If you'd like to sit down, there are chairs. Can somebody help these people, please, to find a place to sit? As you wish. If you'd like to stand, if you'd like to, you can sit down.
Ok, va bene? Ok, perfetto.
Okay, if you're happy standing, no problem. Therefore, what happens is, certain things we project, we project even beyond this life. We're at this fork. Do I choose the materialistic utopia? In this life, I make a conflict. In fact, but then I'll have what I want in paradise. That's a big con, I believe. A big swindle. There are people who try to obtain this now. If I manage to have a lot of money, do this, that, and the other, and I find the knight in shining armor, and I will be happy. There are people who believe this or not. It's a big con, a big swindle. I have nothing against a relationship, a couple, find somebody with whom I find myself I feel good with. But it's neither the cause or the solution of suffering. Because let's remember something, we live and we perceive everything through our own personal filters, and we don't know how to do differently. When I see something, it seems that I'm seeing that, but when I look at you, it seems to me that I'm seeing each one of you. But it's not true. What I'm seeing is my version of you. Even if I lived 24 hours a day with you, I would still see my version of you. When I play the singing bowl, it seems that as everybody was hearing the same voice sound. Is that true? Without philosophizing. Do we hear the same noise or not? Yes. But if we observe the sound I see that each one of you hear, is it the same? No. The vibration that through the air is different, arrives to each person differently according to position. My hearing perceives the sound differently from each one of you. My auditory conscience perceives it in a similar but a different way from each one of you. The value that I attribute to it, the name I give to the sound is different. Therefore, we hear a different sound, each one of us. Therefore, none of us is able to, nobody is able to live this world, see the world without looking through our own filters. And as long as it's dirted by our defilements, such as anger and fear and hatred, we will see the world through this filter, through these emotions. So the fork at the beginning is, what do I want? Really, deep down, what do I really, truly want? Do I want that the world be as I think it should be? Do I want to change the world so that I am well? Or there's the other part of the fork. Do I want to change my way of seeing the world without having the presumption of thinking that I can change the world? And as a consequence of the latter, the way I interact, the world will change anyway. But that's not my principal objective. It's not easy to choose. It's clear, but not easy. Let's imagine that at a certain point we find ourselves. Let's say we find the genie in the bottle. Let's say. So instead of the genie in the lamp, it's a Tibetan one. It's and the Tibetan genie's in this, and he comes out and he says, and the genie says, "Look, I'll give you two choices, not three desires in this case." That's the Arab genie. The Tibetan one says there are two possibilities, one or the other. You have to choose one of them. You have to choose between the first or the second. The first one, you can ask whatever material thing you want, whatever. Try to imagine the body how you want it. Do you want a boy, a man, woman, tall, short? Imagine the body that you'd like, and you can have it. Material situation. How much money do you want in the bank, or do you want the whole bank? The genie can give it to you. Oh, you want to have so much money that you can't even count it. Imagine a number. What work do you want? Oh, you don't want to work? Okay. How many houses do you want? How do you want the houses? It's there. People around you. How many types of people do you want around you? Who do you want them around you? There. Click my fingers and it's there. The genie can give us whatever we want. Let's try to imagine for a second. It would be nice, hey? Yeah, come on. Without any doubt. And then, the genie says, in the story of the genie in the bottle, there's always some kind of the complication. I can give you all, but I can give anything you want, but I can't change anything at an individual level, subjective. I can't change your fear, your satisfaction. I can't change you. Only the world that surrounds you. And the second possibility, that was the second possibility. You can have one or the other. The genie says, okay, the body is what it is. The situation is this. bank account is that it is, the material situation as it is. Work is there, not there, that kind of thing. The people around you are still the same. I can't do anything I can't do anything to change the world around you, but what I can change is I can give you satisfaction, harmony, stability, balance, peace. I can take away your anger, your sadness, your fear, anxiety. Between the two, what do we choose? Somebody might say, well, can I please have a bit of both, please? The reality is that the truth is, if we want a bit of both, we don't trust the second option completely. But in our life, are we working in the sense of putting energy to obtain which one of the two are we working towards, the first or the second? This is something that we need to ask ourselves. When I wake up in the morning, without thinking, where do I put my energy? In resolving problems or learning how to confront problems better? Which of the two? When I find myself in situations, difficult situations, or do I victimize myself because the world isn't, because my husband or my wife, because the world is like this, because this and that one said, and I'm victim of the world, or do I try to, there's an opportunity to try and see what my habits that I should change, how can I can experience the world in a better way. That is the fork that we are confronted by, this choice. One important thing, we're made up of habits, and merely understanding is not very useful. And our projecting on our external world is a very, very deep habit, ingrained habit. Therefore, it's important to remind us continuously and to go back to this strategy, to want to develop our inner qualities, to desire a state of peace which transcends all situations that we find ourselves in. Instead, so-called nirvana. Apart from being a musical group, nirvana, it's this state, inner state of peace that transcends the situation in which we find ourselves. Therefore, what should we do? What can we do? Because at the end of the day, soon we're going to go and eat, and life goes on. And in a while, we're going to die. I'm not bringing bad luck. I'm not going to say, oh, in a short while you're going to die. I'm just saying, let's remember that we are mortal beings. And life as we know it, in a while, it's going to finish. Even if we live until 105, it's still going to end. The fact is that life is made up of moments and days. I don't know why the sensation is that when we're young, we have the sensation that it's like life hasn't started yet. And there's a point in which, and there's a moment in which it's like life's gone by already. But life is the present moment. That's what we're doing now. And let's remember something. When we look at time, the tool we use to measure time is not the quantity, but the quality. So it's not how long you live, but how you live. Dying is not a problem. Also because there's no solution. Oh, there are people who look to avoid death and try to avoid it. But I think it's a crazy thing to do. There are people who are doing scientific research on immortality. And there are people who believe it and invest millions and millions into this. Okay, everybody makes their own choice. But the problem is not dying. The problem is living badly. Life is to get to the end of the day with more rancor, anxiety, fear, sadness, anger. That's the problem. Therefore, what do I want? I want to live in harmony, and this becomes my priority. And to do this, there's a path to follow. Like going up a mountain, climbing a mountain. There's a path. This path to follow. The first step is, Buddha describes it as in 3 phases, 3 aspects of the path, which formally are called the 3 principal aspects of the path. It's like the sickness that causes us to abandon, the state to attain, and the path to being healthy, the path to follow. So once we're in good health, we need to sustain that. Let me open just an aside. In our life, it's so important in so many aspects to go towards health, and not just to turn out put out the fire to avoid sickness. Also between people. When I have a relationship with somebody, be it my mother, father, son, teacher, whomever, the important is for me to ask, what relationship do I want? What would be the ideal relationship with that person? What's a healthy relationship with that person? I want to have a trusting relationship where there's reciprocal love, where there's transparency, which each one does the best he can for the other. We would like that or not? But it doesn't come down from the sky. It has to be created, developed. If I want that kind of relationship, I want to be in harmony with you, and I want a trusting, loving relationship. But then, one day, somebody gets on your nerves and you act with aggression. Does that happen? What's our tendency? Or let's say the other person treats you with aggression, what's our tendency to accept them with love, to accept them and love and allow them to let that anger pass in order to be able to connect with them peacefully after? What normally? Well, so what normally happens is you treat me with aggression, I'm going to be even more aggressive to you. We act with more aggression. And usually what happens? The relationship gradually deteriorates. Oh no. But if what I want is a loving, trusting relationship, when there's a moment where there's conflict, I must first see the other and truly accept the other. Not put myself on the defensive with the other. I must direct myself towards love, trust, and to act in that way because that's what I want to construct. But to do this, I must desire it. I have to give priority to that. It's like Shantideva and Bodhisattva Shantideva asked, what's more important for you? Your inner peace or what others think of you? And our rhetorical response is, inner peace, of course. And Shantideva said, and then why do you get angry when people talk badly about you if that's the case? If inner peace is the most important for you. I have my balance. You like me, don't like me. You think this and that, the other. I'm not going to lose my inner balance because you think this, that, or the other of me. I've got no time to waste on envy and jealousy. I'm going to die soon. Life passes very quickly. We click our fingers and it's gone. The important thing is it's not what we do. Rather, we have this idea that we have to do, produce. But the most important thing is who we become in our lives, internally as a person. And the important thing is how do we die? Who is the person who dies? Internally, and the way in which we interact. And we need to observe if we create more positive or more negative interdependence with the world, and when we interact with the world around us, and with this interdependence. The things to do are threefold. The first is called Nyechung in Tibetan, which terms the literal translation would be the certainty of being able to emerge. Well, it's called definitive emergence, which is kind of a bit strange in English, but it's not in the sense there's an. It means it's the certainty that I can emerge from this situation, I can come out of this state, which is often called the renunciation, which really doesn't have much time to do, though. Actually, renunciation refers to suffering and the causes of suffering. So it's the certainty of being able to get out of the state of suffering, which means loving oneself, which our energy for us to abandon that which is bad for us and to cultivate that which is good for us. That is renunciation. That is definitive. That's definitive emergence, the first step. Don't try and trick yourself. We haven't got any more time to waste. Tomorrow I'll do it. It's not true. We know it's not true. And to do the first step, there's one very important thing. I'm sorry if I'm so blunt, but to be able to love oneself, really, to abandon that which is bad for us and to cultivate that which is good for us, which means taking the reins of our life in our hands, we must stop victimizing ourselves. Which unfortunately is quite common amongst us. Well, I don't feel good. Why? Because this, that, and the other, this happened, he said that. When one is not well, the question is not why am I not well? What do I have to do to be well? That's the question. How can I confront it to the best of my capacities? And not to blame this one or that one. Every now and again I see people in very difficult situation, and they say, why? What do I know? I have to answer. One thing that I do know, the reason for which there's a sickness or a state of conflict, the causes are innumerable. There's not just one cause. It's an infinite number of causes and conditions that mix together to make this happen. But I'm sorry saying, you're asking the wrong question. The question is not why, in order to find something or someone to blame. The question is, what do I have to avoid and what do I have to cultivate to be well? How can I live this moment in the best way possible? A while back, somebody was in a very difficult situation and somebody said, this is good, 'cause like this, you can use this, an opportunity to grow. And I said, ni. In Italian, it's the cross between yes, si, and no. Yes and no. In one way, it is an opportunity and to see oneself and understand one's own dynamics. But it's not certain that will happen. If you take this opportunity, but if you don't, you can use this situation to reinforce bad habits that exist already. When we suffer, very, very often, not always, if not always, in my experience, the experiences of suffering are a mirror which show us unresolved things that we have, our fears, traumas, conditionings, which generate suffering. It's a mirror. But you need it takes a lot of courage to look yourself in these eyes. I'm going to stop being an idiot. In the practice of self-healing, of Lama Ganchen, there's a moment in which we take all our suffering in mental defilements and we give them a kind of form and we eliminate them and we make this gesture. Actually, this is quite difficult to do well because if we look, somehow we're somehow attached to certain of our dynamics. And to take away these dynamics, to eliminate them, it means to really see oneself. And it's not easy. Therefore, the first passage, loving oneself, we have to remember this phrase of Buddha. I am my own protector. I am my own enemy, as Buddha says. It's a quote from Buddha. I'm no one's victim. This doesn't take away the difficulties that certain behaviors are of a nature of negative interdependence and should be avoided. I'm not saying that each one of us hasn't had difficulties, difficult interactions that haven't been beneficial, nice. Somebody might say, oh, it's all right for you to talk like this. You didn't have the father I had. I'm certain that each one of us, if we made a list of all the difficulties in life, we could pass hours and hours making up this. I could also do this. But the question is not why, rather, what can I do today to live this life I have in front of me in the best way possible? And nobody can do it for me. Buddha said, I can't clean your sufferances as if I was using the broom to sweep away dust. I can't change your bad habits. It's not as if I can eliminate these like taking a stain from a cloth. I can't put these qualities into you, but what I can do is I can tell you what to cultivate and what to avoid. I can't solve the problem for you. The first step is to say and to be clear about what you really want. And the clearer this is, and you cultivate one thing and abandon another thing. Renunciation. This is very important. Let's take the example of anger, for example. It's very clear. But there are so many other things we could take as an example. Getting angry is bad, right? Yeah, he said, oh, you shouldn't get angry for this and the other. You shouldn't block and ignore anger. It doesn't work. But the more you get angry, the more you will get angry. If you react towards yourself, it's not a good thing for one personally to desire suffering for the others. Okay, it's good to be determined in front of certain situations, but desire suffering of the others. I know it's not good for me to get angry, to act with jealousy, envy, fear, etc. But knowing is not enough. I remember when I was young, I was in Brazil. I was 8 or 9 years old. I saw my father really happy. My father said, finally understand the reason of suffering. It's ignorance. It's unlimited desire. It's anger now. And I said, oh yeah, okay. In exactly 5 minutes, he started yelling at something or somebody. Therefore, what happens is, it's not enough to suffer. What we need to do is decide what to do. To recognize our habits, our conditionings, our non-virtuous habits. What do we do? 3 steps. First is to truly acceptance and awareness. I see anger. I'm aware of my anger. I don't start feeling guilty, no. I truly accept myself with love. I recognize that manifestation of anger is no good for me, I do not block it. I don't try to go against anger, against envy. I don't block anything. But I said to myself, this is not good for me, so I'm not going to follow it. But the first step is to truly accept ourselves with awareness, because otherwise you can't accept your behavior. Somebody said to me, Lama, it was better when I was unaware, because now not only do I get angry, but I feel guilty afterwards. I feel like, at least when I thought I was right, I felt better. When you find in this situation, it means that you are at the first level, awareness. But it's a habit. It's a habit to get angry, so you can't stop it. The first level is awareness. The second level, so the first level is self-awareness. The second level is not to block it, not to block anger, but I don't follow it. I don't feed it. And this second step is made of 3 levels. I don't follow anger physically. I don't interact physically. I don't take decisions under the influence of anger. And the second level, I don't manifest it in my speech. And the third, I don't interact with anger. I don't feed anger in my mind. I don't enter a dialogue with anger. I don't know if you get angry, but you see what this happened, this, that, and the other, but he said this and that and the other. It's not getting angry, but I couldn't have it. So this dialogue is of no use. When you manifest, when you materialize physically, verbally, or mentally, you reinforce that. The first is you have awareness, you see there, but you don't block it, you don't follow it. It's impermanent and it will pass, because every time we've got anger, did you stay angry forever? Anger comes and then it passes. Therefore, let's imagine it's almost as if we were a big tree. When a strong wind comes, you put the energy in the roots and let the branches sway in the wind. But the roots are stable. You don't block the wind, but you don't follow it. You remain stable and not follow it and not to block it. That's the second step. The third step, to give continuity at the second step. When you manage to do it for a while usually, and then you relax a bit, and then without realizing you start, sooner or later you start getting angry. You don't. The third step is I have awareness, I don't block it, I don't follow it, and I remain in that state of kind of detached state, let's say, until it passes. This is what should be done with all our harmful habits. I avoid that which is harmful. On the other side, I must cultivate that which is good for me. Therefore, each of the phrases, it's as it's said, it's better to be an artificial altruist than a real selfish person. Let's say it's not spontaneous for me to be spontaneously generous, not selfish. But I induce myself to be, it's not forced, but I induce myself towards generosity. It's simply not spontaneous. To be false means showing the world something which is not true. Yeah, I mean a little bit artificial. It's being artificially altruistic means I induce myself to this and I familiarize myself with this. But it's not spontaneous. And there's nothing there's nothing which is not easy once you get used to it. This is what Shantideva said in Bodhicharya Varayatata. And this is the first part. The second part is in which to love others, open our hearts to others. And here there's a very fundamental point to be able to do this, which is to allow ourselves to be grateful and to thank others, to be grateful towards others. And today is Mother's Day, if I understood correctly. In the teachings, Buddhist teachings, there's a point in which one can't go one can't progress in the path until you have gratitude towards your mother. That's what it said. It's very difficult in some situations. But what does that mean? It means that gratitude towards the person who looked after us, not necessarily the biological mother. The point is, I need to have gratitude towards the person who looked after me when I needed it, who treated me with affection and love, and to the best of their capabilities. One thing doesn't negate another. The fact that my mother's not a Buddha, did some wrong things. I think everybody's. Yeah, but I've heard so many times, your mother, you don't know my mother, you don't know what she did. All these traumas that she gave me. But one thing doesn't negate the other. Two wrongs don't make a right. We've received whatever our mother was like, and it's fundamental to be able to feel gratitude when somebody gives us something. When we were small, we weren't able to feed ourselves, to clear ourselves, to do anything. As a newborn, somebody saved our life, or not. Somebody gave us something to eat, fed us, embraced us, gave us life. If somebody saved our lives today, would we be grateful or not? If we weren't able to feed ourselves and somebody feed us, look after us, we'd be very grateful. But that's already happened in our life. It's not as if gratitude expires. It's not like it has a shelf life. The fact is that I received what I received, and the gratitude should remain. It doesn't have an expiry date. The things that we should familiarize ourselves with to work on is on gratitude towards everybody, and to be able to see the other. Thank you for what I received. Thank you. To thank and to feel gratitude is something nourishes ourselves. It nourishes us. It takes absolutely nothing away ever. The fact that you were good to me, that there weren't other negative interactions. One thing does not negate the other. To feel gratitude is important because when we have a deep gratitude, that helps us to get nearer, to get closer to other people. Because the second step is to open our hearts sincerely. This is really important. The third step is to live life in a consistent manner. We could discuss this for hours and hours and hours, how to be. What does that mean? It means I realize that I'm aware that I'm in an impermanent situation, that everything's in continual transformation. We don't need a degree in philosophy to understand this. I think we all realize this. But in our natural, spontaneous way of living, we grasp things as if they were permanent. I see you, I hope to see you tomorrow. The same person, or I expect to see the same person. I want things to continue. I have difficulty to accept changes in my own, transformations in my own body. Instead, to live in a coherent way, I interact with that which is impermanent as if it were impermanent. I mean, I live in a very subjective state. I see things through. I interact. The way I interact is very subjective, based. That's the third point. Path is, I don't allow myself to get swept away by life. I do and diminish things that are harmful. I don't get swept away with them. And I develop my qualities, give priority, develop my qualities, which is divided between love, principally two things, wisdom. So having a view, wisdom is having a consistent view of reality. I see it as it really is. And the compassion and love is inner sentiments towards others. There are many ways, many things which are important, but it's to direct with priority. That's a path that we embark on. The most important thing is not that which happens, but what happens to us when that happens. Let me give you a brief example. I get home. I see that there's the washing up that hasn't been done. What can I say? Oh, I don't feel like doing it. Come on. And then the other person's coming soon. They'll do it. I'll leave it to the other person. Okay. If I do this, nothing serious happens. The other comes, does the dishes, and that's it. But if I say when I say I don't feel like doing the dishes, what does that cultivate? I'm cultivating my own laziness. And if I say the dishes that need to be done, and I feel lazy, I want to do them, and I don't do it, I'm reinforcing my own laziness. In this case, it's much better to wash the dishes. Not because it's better that the dishes be done, which is true, because I don't want to reinforce my own laziness. If I get home and there are the dishes there to be done, yeah, it's a good opportunity to show the other person that they haven't been done. Better not to wash them. What I want to say is, hey, let's not use this to make an excuse. We get home. Sorry, I meant one thing would be to leave them to kind of show the other person, but let's not use it as an excuse. Lama said it was okay if you wanted to make a point, but let's not use it as an excuse. Let's just be aware. Let's not con ourselves. Let's be sure that in every situation, be aware that we reinforce one habit rather than another. And we do this continuously, reinforcing certain habits. Therefore, when we in a situation, it's not the situation itself, it's what habit am I reinforcing, doing this or the other? Is it something that I want to reinforce or something I don't want to reinforce? Because one important thing is, our spiritual path is, it can't happen in the future. It can't happen in one time, sorry. It can't happen in one meditation session or when we recite a mantra. But the spiritual path, it can only really happen when it's applied to every single thing that happens, every part of our life. When working, when with our family, when we're resting, when we're having a good time. And also, obviously, when we're doing mantras, meditating, doing a practice, etc. But it's all or nothing. Either it's there totally or not, in the sense that the direction is how do I live the world every moment. I don't know if that's clear. Then there are moments in which you don't follow. Okay, that's normal. You might have some hiccups, but it must be something that's going to be omnipresent everywhere, all the time. Just to conclude, if somebody asks, what is Buddhism? It's a mix. Vision, a world vision, or rather, what's suffering? What are the causes of suffering? What's happiness? What do I have to do to be happy? What's reality? There's a vision of the world. Every one of us has our own vision of, and there's the part of the behavior, the rules of behavior. What is the best way? What is the best way, mentally, physically, or verbally, to relate to the world? And then there are tools that we can use to familiarize ourselves with what is that which is virtuous. It can be sacred art, it can be mantras, meditation, or meditation with recitation, with visualizations, without, with breath. There are thousands of instruments. There's so many. The reason for which there's so many instruments is because we are different one from the other. Everybody's different. And somebody might say, well, Lama, I like the philosophy, and I don't really like the ceremonial part. And I say, okay, fine, cool, no problem. Somebody might say, no, I can't. When I hear the philosophy, it scrambles my head. I don't want. I liked more mantras or chanting, but actually, really, they're both they're complementary. These two things, but we need to adapt to our own predisposition in how we found ourselves. I've seen people who were only interested in philosophy. In a certain moment, they understood the recitation, visualization, the meditation part, and they managed to follow this in an excellent manner. And there are other people who just did the ritualistic part and the philosophy. But at a certain point, something clicked, and they realized that the philosophy was very important. So these two things, the rituals, practice, and philosophy, are complementary. So, and somebody might say, where do I start? The real is to make friendship with the path, with the center, with people, with Lama, to create a sentiment of trust. And once you have this, anything can happen. I've chosen for a while to not teach in a technical manner. I studied in a very technical manner in Tibet, in India. I've also taught that. Then I realized, at the end of the day, there's so many things. If I explain to you the definition of renunciation of bodhicitta, of the correct vision of reality, the classifications of each one of these things, etc., etc., it would be lovely. I like it. But in practice, what happens? This is an instrument. This helps. But we start with this fork in the road to have the certainty of being conscious of that which we want and direct ourselves in that direction. We have to also kind of risk a bit here. We have to do our part. We have to learn to sit down. And we have to sit down and meditate. We have to apply to each day. We need to analyze what happens as and to really go for this. We need to get out of our comfort zone. That's very important. Out of our comfort zone. Therefore, the path is a beautiful path, a joyful path, but not always easy. Okay. Therefore, there's not one path for everybody. One starting with the heart, in falling in love with the path. And then the way you follow it, it depends on the person and their habits. Okay. I want to thank each one of you for being here. Dogs just barked again. I want to thank for being here with us. What I feel really is none of you that I don't know, I imagine, is here to earn something materially. But it might happen. I can't. And you might maybe, for example, in a monastery in India, in Tibet, there are teachings, and and then they serve tea, and then they make offers. So there might be material reasons for going, like the tea or the offers. No, but here I don't see that. We're not here. We're not here for sensual pleasures. We're in a rather difficult position. We sit in a difficult position. We're not here for image. Not as if here. Yeah, no, somehow in the recent years it's been a bit cool to be Buddhist. No, it's a bit cool. I remember when my parents approached Buddhism, it was considered really weird, strange things. But we don't have a social. We don't need to come here for social reasons. We're not constrained. We're here with the heart open and the mind which is very attentive. Because because there's something important for each one of us. And these moments are, it's not as if I feel I'm teaching you, but in which we're sharing something. I'm sharing things with you that you know already, but it's good to have a reminder to help us to choose. I want to thank you, and if you give me the opportunity for being here, because sincerely it's very good for myself too. And I just would like to ask you just one thing. Don't take anything. Don't take for granted that which we have, the moment we have. And if there's something which you believe to be useful, something we said today, which is of benefit, please do everything you can to put it into practice. That's my only request. Okay, that's my only wish. And before we make the dedications this afternoon, there will be at 3:30 this ceremony, which is called Taking Refuge, which is something which is very personal. And in general, this happens when somebody, a considerable length of time, or it doesn't matter, initially it was 12 years, but it can be much less, decides effectively to follow the path and they're sure of this path. And it's something which requires time. It's not something immediate. Therefore, who would like to come out of curiosity, just to see, to know, and who knows what it's about, can come again to reinforce this and to renovate their wishes. And those who know what it's about and would like to take refuge, all are welcome. Let's make the dedications. And at the beginning, traditionally, we create the motivations, and then at the end, we dedicate that for that which we have received.
Choya simcho rinpoche amake panama ke gyurchi kepa nyampara mepa yang kongne konto pelwarasho. Possa la preziosa mente.
Can the precious, the mind of bodhicitta, precious mind of bodhicitta, which hasn't been born, be born, and that which has been born increase and not degenerate.
Namkara trinle chokchurge padang losan tempe drume sasumgi drove munse takto negurche kewa kunto yanda lamadang drame cheki pela longche ching sadan lamge yente rabzone dorje change kopan yurtobsho nimo dele tsindele Nime kunyan delekshin ninsen takto delekpe kuncho sumke chingi loba kuncho sumke ngodrubotso kuncho sumke trashishun.
At dawn or dusk, at night or midday, may the three jewels grant us their blessings. May they help us to achieve all realizations and sprinkle the path of our lives with various signs of auspiciousness. Have a nice lunch. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Thank you.